and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. That's kind of exciting, that opening.
I go away for 10 days and Miss Kentucky comes out of the closet.
Well,
I'm back. Nice to be back. Thank you, Chris Cooper, for filling in last week.
Yes.
Great job. And this week, our guest at the top of the show is Kate Kendall, the longtime executive director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, National Center for Lesbian Rights, who will talk to us about a whole range of gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgender legal issues, including the big case in the Ninth Circuit, which is giving us heightened scrutiny.
In other news that we'll cover this week, the Methodist Church has dropped a case against a minister who performed a same-sex wedding for his son.
Horrible story out of Texas where a young lesbian couple was murdered. We don't know the motive at this time, but the police do have a sketch, and we will show you that, of the suspect.
Annual excitement coming up on Monday, the New York St. Patrick's Day Parade, where we will be involved as protesters again, not participants.
For the 22nd time.
Aye.
Uganda activists have filed suit versus the anti-gay law there.
That's very exciting. And in Colombia, the first out lesbian Congress member has been elected.
Encouraging news out of the big AIDS conference. We'll tell you the details.
Lots of stories, very interesting. And for those who are fans of A Game of Thrones, one of their actors has come out.
And I'll preview my London reviews. I know you've been waiting for those ever since I left. We're not going to have time to do them all this week because we have a guest, Kate Kendall.
We do.
From the National Center for Lesbian Rights. You've been there since 1994 and executive director for the last 18 years. Grew up Mormon in Utah.
I did. And they still welcome me in San Francisco and New York. So
right. And you live in San Francisco, married to Sandy Holmes, your kids there and everything. Yeah. So,
I have a list here of things to discuss, which is endless. Just start by giving us an overview. You have been at NCLR for 20 years, ED for 18. Where are we in history?
We are at the most catalytic moment of really my life, to say nothing of my career and my time at NCLR. We are, as an organization, busier than we've ever been. And we are in a moment that I never would have imagined, where up until just a couple of years ago, we would plan for things. You'd have a strategy. You'd have a sense of, okay, well, in 6 months, we're going to be doing this, and then in a year, we'll expect a ruling here, and then maybe we'll move here. That playbook has been totally thrown out the window. And now what's happening is that, yes, we're planning for some things and we're engaging in strategy, but we are being much more proactive now than we've ever been able to be before. So much of our work up until this point was reactive. A bad thing would happen and we'd step in. Someone would be hurt, the situation in Texas with this couple, who knows what that requires, but you would react and you would do something about that, or a law would get passed and you challenge it. Now we are scanning constantly for where's the edge? What's the next big thing that we want to be involved in, and where can we press every advantage? Because we now really feel like, in many ways, the wind is at our back. So,
what is the next big thing?
Well, wait a minute. I want to phrase that differently, because there's something that is a reactive situation, but I think it leads us to the next big edge, and that is the Arizona religious freedom case, and the fact that suddenly these potential laws have sprung up around the country, all written by this one right-wing coalition in D.C. We, to our great shock and amazement, beat back the Arizona law. Other states have passed it. Who knows what's happening in Mississippi? I guess what I really want to ask you about that is the right wing keeps saying now, their line is, we've misinterpreted this. We've gone too far. We've made up this whole thing. Can you explain in layman's terms why this really was a bad thing and why it's good we beat it back?
Well, it's not only is it good that we beat it back, but I think it's totally throwing our opposition into complete chaos. We are at a moment now in this country where there is a sense of inevitability that in the not too distant future, there will be full legal equality. Let's put a pin in cultural equality, getting rid of prejudice and bigotry and all of that. But we are very close to winning full legal equality. Marriage in every state, employment protections, housing protections, the kinds of civil rights protections and protection from discrimination that every other group that has been historically targeted now has. What our religious opponents, now there are many religious folks who support LGBT rights, so let's make sure we remember that. But for those who oppose based on religious grounds, they see that we are winning. They see this inevitability, and what they're trying to do is have their practice of bigotry, their religious bigotry, not be impacted one bit by our gains. So they own an apartment building, they want to be able to not rent to a gay or lesbian couple. They own a bakery, they want to be able to refuse service to a lesbian couple. And what happened in Arizona is Arizona did what we've done every single time this has happened before to any other group. We do not allow religious beliefs to trump non-discrimination protections.
Right. So, there are slight religious exemptions in most civil rights laws that say, the Catholic Church doesn't have to ordain women, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, and a church doesn't have to marry a gay couple.
As you know, we've been stuck with this Employment Non-Discrimination Act at the federal level, which a lot of the legal groups have criticized, that has this overbroad religious exemption that wants to let groups off the hook if they have a remote religious connection, like a hospital where they have mostly non-religious employees and things like that. That's the way the bill stands now as passed by the Senate. Can we remove that, and will we?
The Employment Non-Discrimination Act has been languishing for 30 plus years.
In various forms.
In various forms in Congress. We finally saw passage in the Senate, but the religious exemption is one that we're on record, NCLR is on record along with some of our other legal colleagues, expressing concern about the breadth of the religious exemption. And what I think we need to do at this moment, given that we're certainly not going to see ENDA go through this Congress.
The House, not through the Senate.
Go through the House. Get through the midterms and then assess where we are. I think the dynamism that we have seen really requires us to pull ENDA back, to look at it anew, with a new landscape and a new chessboard, and to not give up more than we have to.
Right.
I certainly would never wish an unwilling church to have to marry a same-sex couple.
Of course not.
Nor would I
No
ever
one's ever
say
suggested
that the Mormons can't believe I'm going to hell because of my sexual orientation. But if you're going to be in the public sphere providing services, you must be subject to non-discrimination protections just like everyone else is. And I think ENDA, as it's currently drafted, goes a little bit too far.
What about a state-by-state strategy for ENDA? Go back to getting the 29 states that don't have protections to pass comprehensive civil rights bills, as we're doing sort of city by city at the moment, and make that a more comprehensive strategy.
Well, I think we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. I think we have to work on a federal strategy and look at federal targets and trying to get ENDA through Congress. At the same time, we're working on getting it through the states. Because as we get more states, we will start to see a softening even with our opponents in Congress.
Exactly.
So I think we have to pursue both.
As with marriage also.
And get President Obama to sign an executive order covering contractors.
Well, that's got to happen. That's got to happen right away. I mean, there are people. I was just talking to someone last week who says, "Look, I'm going to be able to be at the White House. I'm going to see Obama for just a couple of minutes. What should I say to him?" Well, I always say two things: say thank you, because we have a lot to thank him for, and say, and Mr. President, we need that executive order for federal contracting and federal employees. We need that mini ENDA to at least apply to the federal government, because every sort of chink in what feels like now this impermeable armor around that is surrounding ENDA so that we can't get it passed, we have to begin breaking that down.
And it's ironic that the contractors we're talking about, for the most part, already have non-discrimination rules, and it's these businesses that convinced Jan Brewer to veto this law in Arizona.
There's nothing that would be remarkable except it would help help people, and it would certainly send a signal for Obama to issue such an executive order. It's not provocative. It's not controversial. I think it should have been done months ago.
So take us to the marriage issue, because you're handling a lot of cases.
We
Just
are.
filed a case in Wyoming.
Courage versus Wyoming.
Yes, I love plaintiffs with names like that. Yeah.
That one you chose to file in state court. Many of them filed in federal court.
We're in the Utah case,
Yep, we're in the Utah
10th
case.
Circuit.
So where are we? And Supreme Court, everything. What's the schedule? What's going on?
Boy, it is just catalytic and almost impossible to keep up with what's happening with marriage. There are, I think, at last count, and I just counted this last week, so hopefully I didn't miss one, 42 cases in 23 states, either state court or federal court, challenging the exclusion of same-sex couples from the right to marry. NCLR alone is involved in cases in Idaho, Tennessee, Wyoming, Utah, Florida. And then we're helping behind the scenes in a range of other states. But just listen to those states: Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, Tennessee, Florida. These are not states that even a couple of years ago we would have thought, wow, that's going to be the next vanguard of winning marriage. And yet look, in Oklahoma, Texas, Virginia, and Utah, we've recently won federal
Kentucky.
Kentucky, that's right, Kentucky. We've won rulings at the federal court. It is clear that the dam has burst, and we now have hit that point which every civil rights movement needs to hit. It's not just about the Democrats support us, or it's not just the progressives and liberals support us. This is a nonpartisan, this is a beyond ideology issue. It's an issue of fundamental humanity and dignity and fairness. And once you hit that point, there's no
Maybe
stopping.
Antonin Scalia will have to go along now, since.
I don't picture that happening.
Well,
Well, some Republican judges have.
some people are so, deeply ingrained in their bigotry that they're not going to be moved. And I would love nothing more than to be wrong about maybe one or two justices on the Supreme Court. I just don't think those are votes we're going to get. But the court's going to hear this.
So how do you see it playing out? Does it even have to go to the Supreme Court?
Well, I think it will. I think the Supreme Court ultimately will need to make a final decision about marriage for the entire country.
Even if every circuit comes up with this decision?
Well, right now, I think we could win a majority of circuits. There are some circuits that I would be worried about because there are judges who are just fixated in their prejudice against LGBT people. The question is going to be, is the Supreme Court ready to take a case this year? Because I think probably the Utah case and the Virginia case might both be decided and ready and have writs filed before the U.S. Supreme Court. Or will the court decide to wait, and at least for maybe a couple of more circuits, to weigh in? And will they wait a year?
Well,
I don't think we're looking at more than a year or two.
Is a likely schedule that they could accept cases in the fall term for decision the following spring?
We could be talking, if it was next year at this time, we could be getting ready for argument in March on marriage once and for all in the rest of the country, and be looking at a ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court in June of next year. It could be that soon.
And who's going to argue that case?
That was my question.
With all the groups that are
My
involved.
God, they're elbowing each other out of the way like crazy. Olson and Boyce and Lambda and ACLU and, of course, NCLR.
But what a great problem to have. Attorneys crawling over themselves to get involved in these cases.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be finding firms that would weigh in on our side, having the bandwidth to be able to take a case to the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, we dreamed of moments like this. So, I think it's still up in the air who would be the set of attorneys, or who would be the attorney that's arguing. As far as I'm concerned, I want it to be the best attorney for that moment. And, of course, I just want to win. And I think we're headed towards victory, and we're headed towards a huge sea change for LGBT people in this country, particularly on the issue of marriage. And I just love the fact that so many people want to be at the party.
So we talked about the Ninth Circuit case. This was happened to be around jury selection in gays, and we got heightened scrutiny in that case in a way some people thought we never had before, but you think we've gotten it before in the Prop 8 case. What is the significance of Abbott Pharmaceuticals is not going to pursue this anymore?
Right.
So the Ninth Circuit, how secure is that now, and what does it mean?
Well, it's completely secure. And one thing that is important about that case is that now that's the law of the entire Ninth Circuit.
Right.
That if you have a classification that discriminates based on sexual orientation, that classification will be subjected to heightened scrutiny. That is a much more rigorous kind of examination by the court than simply, oh, well, we have a perfectly good reason for discriminating against gay people, and here it is, and then you have to, is that rational or not? It's a more simple analysis. This now means, after Abbott, that almost any law that discriminates against individuals based on sexual orientation is doomed to fail. And that is important.
Right.
That is definitely worth noting.
Do we have it from any other circuit? And did we get it at all from Windsor?
We don't have
from the
it,
Supreme Court.
We don't have it in any other circuit where it's the law of the case. We've had other cases that have ruled that heightened scrutiny should apply, but then they've been undermined by the U.S. Supreme Court finding a lower level of scrutiny. And in Windsor, the Supreme Court's cases on how to treat laws that discriminate against gay people has been one that has defied the analysis I learned when I was in law school. They don't just apply rational basis or intermediate scrutiny or strict scrutiny.
They do what they want to do.
They do what they want, but they've, to date, always ended up in the right place. Because what Justice Kennedy, he's been the major author of most of these rulings, although Ginsburg was the author of one of them. What he's looked at is he's looked at the law that discriminates, and he's applied rational basis with what scholars call a little bit of extra bite. And he doesn't just accept that the law is rational because the people who engaged in the illegal practice or the discriminatory practice say so. He really looks and examines what is the justification. And in Windsor, the federal government had all sorts of justifications. Well, we need certainty. The states don't recognize marriages. It's too difficult to maintain, to provide these benefits. It's too expensive. And he looked at that and he said, wait a minute. None of that is sufficient to justify taking an entire category of married couples and making them strangers to federal protection. And I think whenever they hear the marriage case, it will be that same analysis. Now, certainly we will argue for a higher level of scrutiny because that provides us greater protection, but truly, I don't think we need it, because I think we are now at a moment in LGBT legal analysis where there simply is no rational reason to not permit same-sex couples to marry. You may disagree with it religiously, you may disagree with it because historically it's always been a certain way, but you're never able to show any reason that justifies such a blanket fencing off of an entire category of people from having their relationships.
But that is a cultural advance too, because we have put ourselves in a position where we can no longer be regarded as illegitimate human beings.
Yes.
And once we achieve that status as normal people to most of the population, then you don't have any rational basis to discriminate.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, as these cases are, one thing that fascinates me is that these various courts in these various states seem to be taking care of DOMA Section 3 as well as 2 by saying that states have to recognize each other's legitimate marriages. That's kind of fascinating as a footnote. But also, as these various circuits take on these marriage cases, you're in the Nevada case is in the Ninth Circuit.
Yep.
You're in the Utah case in the 10th Circuit.
Right.
If these circuits legalize marriage in these ways, is that going to make marriage legal throughout those circuits without the individual states that haven't done so doing anything?
Yes, that should be the effect. That will very likely be the effect of a win at either the Ninth Circuit or the 10th Circuit. It will apply, that ruling will apply to all states in the circuit. However, both rulings, if we win in both of those circuits, the rulings could be stayed, put on hold, pending the state appealing. Okay. And I can, bet you dollars to donuts that, if we were to win in the Ninth Circuit case, if Lambda were to win their case in Civic, that, Nevada will appeal very likely. If not, that, yay, fabulous. And in some cases, states aren't appealing. Utah, is absolutely going to appeal if we win at the 10th Circuit. So I think that's another reason why this ultimately is going to have to be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, deciding it once and for all. One thing the High Court, can't really tolerate is chaos. in the circuits below. And in some circuits, maybe there'll be a blanket application of a pro-marriage ruling, and in another state, another circuit, there won't be. They have to recognize we're all one union, and they care about keeping the union together, and that more than any other reason will be why I think the court will take a case, if not this year, I think no later than next year.
Couple of small things. Michigan has the only current real full trial on marriage, where
Yep.
the last witness said he was against it because gay people are going to hell.
He was asked a question and he gave God's answer.
Yes, he did.
His God's answer.
Yes, of course.
Are we going to win there? Is there any...
Well, you know, the Michigan case started out as an adoption case. It
Yes.
started out as a second parent adoption. The judge said, well, wait a minute, shouldn't they be able to marry? And the next thing you know, now we've got a full-blown trial. One thing that the Michigan trial demonstrated is the same thing that the Prop 8 trial demonstrated. When you put our opponents' arguments under the scrutiny of trial and cross-examination, it's all hat and no cattle. They've got nothing. They have
Westerner.
their bigotry, they have their prejudice, they have their anti-gay religious beliefs, but in terms of what you need to demonstrate to justify discrimination in a constitutional democracy against a whole category of people, they do not have it. And I think we'll see a victory in the Michigan case.
And one last thing, because we're over time. You are working with Chris Kluwe in
Yes.
his suit against the Minnesota Vikings.
Well, he hasn't sued yet. Chris Kluwe came out in support of marriage equality when he was a punter for the Vikings. He then ended up later in the year being let go. It is Chris's view that he believes a big reason why he was let go was because of his outspoken support of same-sex couples. We're working with a local attorney in Minnesota, and an investigation has been launched by the Vikings to figure out, okay, what really did go on, because Chris definitely heard very homophobic comments from some of the coaching staff. And we just want to change the climate in sports. We've done sports work for a long time, and we want Chris to have his day. We want him to be honored for the courage that he had, and we want whoever was responsible for the homophobic comments to understand that's not okay.
And are we going to win that one? Or
Well, we're waiting to see what the result is of the Vikings investigation. I'm hopeful because I do think the owners of the Vikings and some of the people
They're
involved
very
in the
pro-gay,
investigation
yeah.
are super supportive of LGBT issues. And one thing that we're totally seeing, in addition to all this other legal stuff that's going on, the stuff that we're seeing in sports, Michael Sam, Jason Collins, what's happening here with the Vikings, Chris standing up even though he's not a gay person himself. When you can change the sporting culture, that's when you know you're not very long away from winning.
Great.
All right.
And thanks to you.
Thank you. Well, it was great. Well, I love doing this work. It was great to be here today.
And I'm only sorry we can't talk to you for another 3 hours. But you can follow Kate's work by going to the National Center for Lesbian Rights website at nclrights.org. Thank you. I know you're staring me down.
No, you got it. You got it.
nclrights.org. Come back often, please.
Anytime.
Okay.
Anytime. It was great
Thank
to see you. Thanks, Andy.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Good to see you.
All right, we're sliding Kate out, and we're going to move on to other headlines.
Okay. Well, I mean, we really are winning on the marriage issue. There was a poll of young Republicans that came out that said 61% support same-sex marriage. And in Oregon, the Republican Party conference there voted to support same-sex marriage, 233 to 162, especially
Crazy.
pressed by young people who are tired of apologizing for their party.
Yeah, there are cynics who don't really trust what they've decided to do and say, look, you still can't support Republicans. They're still against abortion.
Yes.
They're still against a lot of other stuff. But it is an interesting indicator that they voted to actually endorse the...
Hey, if we win all this, the Democrats might have to do something liberal on some of these other issues, too.
Interesting little dust up in Indiana where 4 couples filed suit
Yes.
for marriage, and the marriage equality people are a little upset because they've spent the year fighting the legislature and beating back a constitutional amendment, and they were afraid this would throw a monkey wrench in what they've accomplished there. But the week has gone by. I think we're going to be safe there, and then the suit will proceed.
Ann mentioned the Michigan case. The ruling there is expected in about a week or so.
Yeah.
And in Illinois, Some clerks are waiting till June 1st, which is when the legislature actually said same-sex marriages begin, although Cook County and others are doing it. They say they need clarification.
You know, the Attorney General of Kentucky is refusing to defend their ban, so they put out an ad soliciting lawyers to defend the ban. They're offering $125 an hour. I don't think they're going to get the top-level people, but our people work for nonprofits and don't make even that kind of money.
In Wisconsin, the same-sex marriage the case is a little complicated there because they have that law there that says if you go out of state to get married in a way that you can't be married in Wisconsin, you can be criminally prosecuted. But several district attorneys have said, we're not going to prosecute around that.
Good.
So we're therefore not asking for an injunction there. We're just waiting for the judge to rule and hope that the judge will rule quickly.
It looks like expedited schedules for appeals in the Virginia cases, and in spite of earlier fighting, the Olsen Boyce team, which won at the district court level, has welcomed the ACLU and Lambda and Paul Smith into their case. They've now consolidated the cases, or they're about to consolidate the case. The ACLU team joined the Olsen Boyce case so they could move all this along.
And even though, as you reported, that the Pope said we should look into civil unions, and Cardinal Dolan in New York said, well, he didn't say he's for it. He just said we should look into why that's appealing to certain people. Civil rights appealing? You have trouble figuring that out?
Well, what also struck me is, civil unions is quickly becoming an outdated construct. It's not.
It started out as something that we could get when we couldn't get anything else, like domestic partnerships.
To make it clear, we weren't asking for.
No, it was all we could get from New York City, for instance. So that's what we argued for.
Yes, but in some places it was an alternative.
And obviously in Europe, it was the way to go at the first round, including in the Netherlands and everywhere else.
But the fact that people are getting excited about the Pope supporting it seems to me a little too late.
Right, exactly.
Because we're way beyond that. It is exciting that in New York, the Methodist bishop has dropped the planned prosecution of a minister.
Thomas Ogletree, who was the former dean of the Yale Divinity School, who performed a same-sex wedding for his son. Mm-hmm. Now, don't forget, in Pennsylvania, they defrocked a minister who did this. But they say that these trials, in New York, they're saying, these trials cause harmful polarization. You think?
And they reached a kind of agreement where Ogletree agreed to participate in conversations about this. Great, he gets to talk other people into it. Right. And I got a note from a viewer who wrote a really interesting blog piece about an older couple who'd been together for 58 years and then finally got married when it became legal in New York. And 5 months later, one of the couple died. And the surviving member of the couple eventually applied for Social Security benefits and was told that there is a law that says you have to have been married for 9 months because they want to get rid of these, sort of deathbed marriages for the benefits.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
I'm going to stop courting those guys.
But these guys have been together for 58 years. And so now the widower has registered his case with Lambda. They're looking into challenging it. But if you're considering getting married and you're waiting until it's legal in your state, here's a warning. You have to have been married for 9 months to get Social Security benefits. And go talk to Lambda if this is an issue for you.
All right. The Episcopalian Church had that big dispute with anti-gay churches that wanted to leave, and they wanted to take the property with them. Yep. But the church law says you can't do that, and the Supreme Court of the United States just said that's up to them. We're not getting involved with that. They wouldn't take the case. They spent millions of dollars fighting this instead of giving it to the poor.
In Idaho, people are still getting arrested in protests at the legislature, but the first cases for the first protest came to court for the first 13 protesters who were arrested. The prosecution didn't show up.
All right.
So they had no charges to act on, And the judge said, goodbye. This is gone. The prosecutors evidently have decided not to press this.
Well, that's what Ralph Reed has said about the federal marriage amendment. He told the Conservative Political Action Committee that it's dead, and it would be like trying to put the genie back in the bottle. And they let the National Organization for Marriage have a basement booth this year.
Yeah, that's how big they are.
Okay.
CPAC was sort of mixed this year. There was still plenty of anti-gay stuff, but also some pro-gay stuff too. Not that we're suggesting you look towards them. Congratulations to Jason Collins, who is being signed by the Brooklyn Nets for the entire rest of the season. He was signed originally for the 10-day contract, then for the second 10-day contract, but before that was even up, the Nets said, yes, we want you for the rest of the season.
And congratulations to all the gay billionaires. Actually, there are only 7 out of 1,645 that Forbes was able to find around the world, including David Geffen, PayPal founder Peter Thiel, is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
Jennifer Pritzker, who's transgender, Dolce and Gabbana, and Michael Kors, who does the menswear, and John Stryker, who was a philanthropist. Billionaires.
Yeah. Congratulations to Florida A&M University, which has adopted a non-discrimination policy for sexual orientation and gender identity and expression.
And congratulations to Virginia on unanimously repealing the law against oral sex and anal sex. It was already ruled unconstitutional, but a lot of states still leave those things on the books.
More than a dozen states still have it on the books, and what that means is that while it's been outlawed, cops will still arrest you.
They can.
Absolutely.
Then it gets thrown out.
Then it gets thrown out, but meanwhile, you may have had your name in the paper or in the public records. Anything could happen to you, yeah. And Oxford, Mississippi has joined Starkville and Hattiesburg in rejecting discrimination of any kind, including sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression.
And the Human Rights Campaign has said to Mississippi that they believe that existing statutes protect religious freedom, so you don't need to do this this religious thing. But they're also calling for explicit LGBT rights protections in the bill.
They're
if you're
calling
serious
the bluff.
about that,
yeah,
yes.
they're saying, look, you say that these religious freedom bills are not about gay people and are not directly targeted, and you're overblowing it and everything. So HRC said to Mississippi, and there has probably been a vote in Mississippi by the time you see this, because we're taping on Wednesday and we're expecting a vote momentarily, but and not a good vote. They're saying, look, if what you say is true, then go ahead and add non-discrimination provisions in this religious freedoms bill, and then we can take care of it all at once. And you can have religious freedoms and we can have non-discrimination, but they're not going to do that.
Okay. We should talk about the terrible situation in Texas.
Yes.
Where a young lesbian couple from Houston was found murdered in Port Bolivar, near Galveston, I guess, on March the 9th. We have a picture of the couple, Brittany Cosby and Crystal Jackson, both 24 years old. The motive in the case is unclear, but they, we don't have that's the picture of the couple, the young couple, loving couple.
One shot, one beaten to death.
Yes, horrible. But again, we don't know the motive. We also have a pic, if we could switch that to the suspect, a sketch of the suspect in the case, who may be driving a 2006 Kia Sorento that was owned by Cosby. If you want to learn more about this or how to make a report, go to avp.org to learn more about the case.
And in New York City, in thankfully not a murder, but another case of violence, and in the West 4th Street subway station a week or so ago, a gay couple who had been out celebrating their 10th anniversary were approached by a guy who was, harassing them. Are you gay? Are you gay? and they just tried to ignore him and walk away. And he attacked them, beat one of them, broke his nose and eye socket.
In Greenwich Village,
Absolutely.
where a lot of these things seem to be happening. I guess that's where they come to find us.
Exactly, and that is the other side of having a famous neighborhood.
But we are everywhere, including in Seattle, where we've told you about the Catholic the gay Catholic school vice principal who was fired for getting married, even though they knew he was gay.
Mark Zamuda.
He is suing the school and the archdiocese.
Now, this is interesting, and I tried to ask Andy about this before we taped, and I thought he had a good answer, so I'll ask him again. How is it that a guy who goes to work for a Catholic school with an explicit policy that you have to follow Catholic doctrine as an employee gets fired because he entered into a same-sex marriage? How does he have any right to sue?
Right. The religious exemptions to most human rights laws only apply to ministerial functions. If he were a religion teacher and he were saying things against the church's teaching or something like that, that might be covered. But he has an administrative position here. Now, they're going to say first of all, again, and also he's got a good case because they knew he was gay, and he can prove that they knew he was gay. And
he used to be invited to the principal's house for dinner with his partner.
They accepted him when he was living in sin. There was no Catholic. When you get married, it doesn't even say anything about your sexual behavior, as many people know. In terms of that's what's forbidden by Catholic teaching. So. Very few people bring these cases because most people don't come out who work for these kinds of institutions. Mm-hmm. But that's changing in our world, and it's changing a lot because people want to get married.
Well, speaking of Catholics and gay people and celebrations, I put the last part in. The St. Patrick's Day parades are coming up. In New York City and Boston are areas of interest this year. In New York, there's a renewed push with a change in mayor from Giuliani and Bloomberg, who were just horrible about not paying any attention to the discrimination of the parade, and we're out there marching happily. But de Blasio comes in as a Democratic progressive mayor, and we go to him again and say, look, it's a discriminatory parade. And not only do we not want politicians to march and support this discrimination when they went to court to have this declared a Catholic parade, but to have the right to keep the gays out. But we think it stinks that the cops and the firefighters are representing the city by marching in uniform in this parade. And the mayor and major politicians said they wouldn't march.
But the police commissioner, Bratton, said he would march, and he said it's a celebration of my Irish heritage. Well, no, it's not. It's not defined that way by these organizers, and you shouldn't have anything to do with them, Bill Bratton. The Irish Times went after the Prime Minister of Ireland, who's also coming over here to march, even though some of his ministers are not, because it's discriminatory. And they published an editorial saying marching in a religious procession posing as a celebration of Irish identity is unacceptable.
They can't have it both ways.
Right.
And they refuse to acknowledge that in Ireland, gay groups march openly. And I discovered this week, in Pittsburgh, they have a non-discriminatory parade. And
San Francisco has one. There are a couple around the country. Well, we don't know if it's non-discriminatory. I don't think anybody's tested the Rockaway one.
Well, they asked them, and they claim they don't discriminate.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, because de Blasio.
Yeah, I heard that on Gay USA last week.
Yeah. But in Boston, they've been arguing this because a new mayor came in and he said, I can fix this. They always think they can fix it. They can't fix it because the parade organizers are adamant.
Well, if they wanted to follow the lead of the tone of the Pope, they would simply put a gay group in there and say, we got no problem with this. They're our brothers and sisters.
But they don't feel that way. They are
reactionaries.
Stuck. So the Boston mayor tried to negotiate a compromise, whatever that would be, and said, I fixed it. You can march. You just can't have a banner or pins or signs or anything that identifies you as gay. And then he was surprised when the gay group said, excuse me, we're not doing that. And so then it became a fight because the the organizers said, well, you said you wanted gay veterans to march, and this parade is to honor veterans, but you don't even have any veterans. So now the gay group has said, here are 12 veterans who have signed their names with their ranks and all their war service, and they want to march, and they don't want to be put back in the closet when they've served their country like this. And what are you going to say about that?
Right.
No,
Well,
but
so I imagine there'll be some kind of protest up in Boston. There's definitely going to be one in New York. We are going to be on Fifth Avenue between 56th and 57th Street on the west side of the street. It's going to be a much bigger demonstration these days.
Yeah.
It was down to about 10 people last year. But kids come along and pick up the signs when they see what it's about because they want to support us.
here's a more interesting event that's going to happen in Boston in a couple of weeks. They have a governor's race coming up. And there are like 10 candidates for governor, and the gay group Mass Equality is staging a candidates debate of public forum. And 7 of the 10 candidates have agreed to show up for this on the 25th at the Boston Public Library. And you know who one of them is?
No, I don't.
Scott Lively.
He's one of the candidates?
He is a candidate for governor of Massachusetts.
This is the guy who was behind the Uganda lock up the gays forever bill.
He's being sued in Springfield, Mass. Court by the gay activists in Uganda for bringing this stuff over there.
Is he going to come out?
He's supposedly going to come out to this event. I'll be surprised if he shows up, but maybe he will revel in the hatred from the audience.
Well,
but if you're in Boston on March 25th, you might want to go to that.
Speaking of hatred, in South Carolina, the legislature there will not back down on cuts in funding to 2 public colleges that assign gay-themed books to freshmen on the required reading list. The College of Charleston assigned Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, and University of South Carolina Upstate assigned something called Out Loud, the Best of Rainbow Radio. The antis wanted the students to have the option to read something else and not be required.
Look, there was plenty of room for discussion around these books. The whole point was that they were supposed to start discussions, and the idea that they would ban certain books that didn't.
I mean, if the Bible were on a required reading list, I wouldn't object. It's as literature.
Have you read the Bible?
Some of it.
It's a mess.
I was raised Catholic. We weren't so big on the Bible.
Well, in other reading lists, or not actually reading lists, but in other schools' issues, the New York City schools have issued guidelines on how to respect and properly treat transgender students. And there's some good guidelines there and lots of issues covered. But the problem is, per the transgender community, none of this is mandatory. None of it is there's nothing about enforcement in there, which is very typical of the New York City schools.
And we know because we've worked in them for 30 years.
So it's a good step forward, but there's a lot more that needs to be accomplished. Meanwhile, there's news that a transgender female student in California has been accepted as a member of a high school girls softball team. Let's hope that goes smoothly.
Little development, little wrinkle in the Arizona case where Governor Brewer, of course, vetoed that horrible anti-gay religious thing. Her staff worked on preparing the bill.
Well, sure. Does that surprise you?
Yeah, I mean, as well that she certainly didn't acknowledge that in her statement.
Well,
she was part of the bill.
I'm sure they consult on many bills, and then when the uproar ensues, they have a new attitude.
Yeah. All right. Dallas City Council passed a comprehensive statement of support for LGBT employees, 13-2. Now they're going to look at ways to treat the employees more equally there. And a horrible case of the Senate of the United States blocking Obama's pick, Debo Adegbile. Is that how you say his name? Adegbile, as head of the Civil Rights Division, because he fought for civil rights.
Yeah.
And
because he submitted a brief in the Mumia case from Philadelphia.
And he was called the cop killer.
Cop killer,
coddler.
yeah.
Terrible. And 70% say businesses, Ray Enda, 70%, they did a survey, say business should not be able to cite religious beliefs to discriminate against gays.
Okay.
And we got an out gay mayor in Santa Fe, Javier Gonzalez. And Arizona State Senator Steve Gallardo has come out. See, that's what happens, right wing. You press us on these issues, we come out. That's what happens.
You're doing our work for us. All right, international news. Well, speaking of coming out, there's a lesbian who has been elected to the Congress in Colombia. She's the first out gay member of the House of Representatives there. Her name is Angelica Lozano, member of the Green Alliance Party.
In Uganda, activists there have filed suit in Uganda Constitutional Court versus those anti-gay laws there. They're asking the police to stop enforcement pending adjudication of it, which can take years, and they want the newspapers barred from exposing gay people, as the paper Red Pepper did. But a great development in that is that the group All Out did prevail upon Orange, which is a cell phone company, to stop advertising in Red Pepper because of their printing, names of the 200 top homos in Uganda.
Yeah, that is a big win. And the interesting thing about the anti-gay Uganda law is that it has one more step to go through before it's official. It has to be gazetted. It has to be published in some way. And that hasn't happened yet. So there is still hope there. But I love this lawsuit they've filed. They have claimed that the law violates constitutional right to equality, privacy, freedom of expression and association, and that there was no quorum that passed it. And I think it's kind of brilliant that the local activists have said, look, we are going to use the system on this. We're going to go to court. And I think that going to court like that is a way for the politicians to sort of save face on this. Well, we passed this law because we agree with the people and all your prejudice, but really the courts made us stop it.
Well, if that's what they feel, but I think they're sincerely anti-gay and will want to get rid of the judges.
I think they are sincerely interested in being reelected, and that's why they are going along with fear and ignorance, because that's what will keep them in office.
As they are in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is the latest country to say, this is one that doesn't ban gay sex,
right,
but they're looking to pass a Nigeria-style anti-gay law.
They have an open gay population in Kinshasa who are going to be in big trouble if they pass this law,
right,
because they want to send gay people and transgender people to jail.
Now, March
for years.
7th, there were worldwide demonstrations against the Nigerian anti-gay law.
Yeah.
There were 400 who demonstrated at the consulate in New York, including Ann Northrup. 9 were arrested from Housing Works. And there was a demo in London as well that I was at. I have a picture of that. If we have that picture of the London demo. These were mostly Africans who were demonstrating there in London outside Nigeria House.
Yet in Nigeria, the day before these demos, 4 more men were forced in a Sharia court to confess and were whipped and sent to prison. But they didn't get the death sentence because they said their behavior was in the past and they promised not to do it again. Yikes.
The Dalai Lama has said that he sort of supports same-sex marriage. He says each country has a right to decide it.
Yeah,
he's never been so great on gay stuff. But, he got a headline out of it anyway. And
Queen Elizabeth, I don't know if you're aware of this,
no,
and all the
I'm
major political leaders
I was in England. I didn't hear anything about her.
Congratulated the Lesbian and Gay Switchboard on its 40th anniversary. So someone put up this very clever shot of 7 different outfits of the Queen that form a rainbow.
Well, they believe this is the first time that she said the words gay and lesbian.
Yes.
About time.
Yeah.
You've been on the throne for what, 60 years?
Yeah. In Russia news, you saw us covering the open games in Moscow that were undermined by the government, that got venues to throw people out. Well, the U.S. Embassy hosted an LGBT Russians versus diplomats basketball game to sort of make up for the fact that the open games. So it's nice that the U.S. is trying to help out. And Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, spoke to State Department employees this week and global heads of missions around the world, and spoke very strongly on behalf of helping LGBT people around the world. Told them, we need you to be a clarion voice to decry laws that would lock people up because of who they love, and to find new ways to protect vulnerable members of the LGBT community. So, you know, they have a real mission. On the other hand, I was at a UN AIDS meeting this week discussing how the UN AIDS organization could help get around or get rid of these laws in Uganda and Nigeria and everywhere else they're
Which
popping
are
up.
hampering HIV prevention efforts and AIDS treatment efforts.
And people are doing a lot, and they're helping with people seeking asylum in this country, and they're doing stuff in country there. But it also, a point was raised in this meeting that a lot of the organizations that get money from UNAIDS to do AIDS work in these countries are homophobic. Right. And some of the UNAIDS staff are homophobic. We have a long, long way to go in educating people and getting them up to speed.
Right. We left Russia for a second, but there were LGBT protesters there who were pelted with eggs this week. They were at a rally carrying rainbow flags in the International Women's Day parade. They arrested the thugs who threw the eggs for a change.
Yes.
Found them carrying knives and crowbars, which they intended to use.
They also made the people carrying the cops made the people carrying rainbow flags take them down. So if you look at the footage of it, you see rainbow flags at the beginning and then no rainbow flags. Also, the big neo-Nazi who had been running the sort of seduction, kidnapping, beat the gays thing on VK.com.
Anti-pedophile league or something.
Occupy pedophilia. And they arrested him when he fled to Cuba or somewhere, and now he's in jail. He's still running the operation from jail. There is no end. Much as we agree with Kate that things are improving here. All right, AIDS news. Well, actually, there's stunning AIDS news, all out of the Conference on Retroviruses and Opportunistic Infections that was held last week. Really amazing stories. First is this partner study that found absolutely no transmission of HIV between serodiscordant partners, one positive, one negative, if the person who's positive had undetectable virus.
This is a big long-term study, 787 couples. They all, the infected partner has to have under 200 copies per milliliter of the virus. The final results on this are due in 2017, but gay and straight, they didn't transmit it.
Yeah, they're not willing to say it's 100% sure, but they're talking about 97%
Well, here's what they
surety.
said. They said the maximum chance of transmission is 1% a year for any anal sex and 4% a year for anal with ejaculation. But then they asked the researcher, and he said the true likelihood is closer to 0.
Yeah. Which is a superb reason to get yourself tested, and if you are positive, get on treatment to suppress the virus. Because
you're going to help yourself and you're going to help others.
Now, footnote, of course, this none of this stops transmission of other sexually transmitted diseases. Right. So keep that in mind.
Yes, we still want everybody to be safe.
Yeah.
And then there's this big study on gene therapy for HIV. Editing genes to protect in a way that there's natural protection for some people, and they're trying to mimic that with edited genes. 1% of men, of women too, I suppose, of Northern European descent cannot get the virus.
Here's what happens. This is a much smaller study because this is just a safety study to begin with.
Yes.
So they took 12 people, and what they did was they removed their T cells and they modified them genetically. They took off the CCR5 receptor, which is what HIV attaches to get into cells. cells to multiply. And they took that off the immune cells, the T cells,
Yes.
and then reinserted them in people. And what they found was that they were a lot less likely
Yes.
to have HIV replicate.
So it's not a cure, it's not a vaccine. In fact, one of the researchers said cure is a 4-letter word. We don't like to use it, particularly with HIV. It's a way of improving the health of people with HIV. And now they hope to begin larger trials. On some of the patients where it failed, they, by the way, they smelled like garlic. Because, I get into why, because they... Anyway.
We only have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's fascinating, though.
And there was a report of another baby who had been born with HIV, who's now HIV negative after being hit with full, quick treatment with a 3-drug course of treatment. Usually they do lesser treatment, but they really knew that the baby had HIV. It wasn't just antibodies, and they really know that the baby does not have HIV anymore. The question is, when do you stop the treatment?
And the Iowa Supreme Court heard the case this week of Nick Rhodes, who was imprisoned with a 25-year sentence for not telling a sex partner he had HIV, even though he didn't transmit it. His sentence was cut, but he's on a sex offender registry, and this is outrageous. He used a condom, too. Louisiana, Lambda got them to agree to accept third-party payments for health insurance for people with HIV. And the trailer for The Normal Heart is out if you want to Google that online.
Very important forum coming up at the New York Public Library next week on Wednesday the 18th at 7 p.m. Our Gay and AIDS Activist History Connecting the Dots from Stonewall to the Present, run by our very own Bill Ballman. With guests on the panel. It's going to be a spectacular multimedia presentation. And
we'll be there.
We'll be there March 18th, 7 p.m., New York Public Library.
Okay.
Quick entertainment news.
Game of Thrones star Christian Nairn has come out as gay, saying it's impossible to, it's important to stand up and be counted. I have IMP there. He was asked about his following among gay bears, and he said, "You're talking about my community." So that's how he came out. He wasn't asked if he was gay. He just said, "You're talking about me."
Well, he says he's been out forever, but no one ever would, because he tries to talk about it in the press, and they don't know how to talk about it, so they don't follow up. But the Game of Thrones comes back to HBO on April 6th. Looking into its first season, it got more interesting as it went along.
A little bit, yes, it did. In fact, one of the actors, Russell Tovey, the British guy who plays the boss, I just saw him in a play called The Pass in London. I'll talk a little bit more about it next week. I'm going to do my London reviews next week because we don't have time. You can read my reviews by going to our website, www.gayusatv.org. And if you're going over right now, the one play I want to recommend is a play called Versailles, about the aftermath of World War I, which has a gay theme in it as well, a fascinating one. And and the King Lear which I saw at the National Theater, you're going to be able to see here in May on NT Live. Okay.
And
I'll tell you more about it next week.
We told you about Ellen being mean to Liza at the Oscars. Liza has replied. I think she went a little astray on it. I wish she'd acknowledged my friend Liza Minnelli. It would have been a nice thing to say. I don't think she meant any harm at all, and she's a wonderful lady.
Isaiah Washington
still nasty.
is returning to Grey's Anatomy as a guest star 7 years after calling T.R. Knight a faggot on the set, which got him fired, basically.
Yeah. And Rosie O'Donnell's on the Fosters, and we have to go.
I thought we were set. You have 3:52.
10 more seconds? 10 more seconds.
No, I got 2 more minutes here.
There is the
that's
countdown.
The actual time? All right, but you have this down.
I've been pointing to the countdown for minutes.
Well, my friend Ann says we're done. If you want to get on our email list, write to me at andyhum@aol.com.
Welcome back.
Thanks. Nice to be back, even if I get yelled at sometimes.
See you all next week.
Like Piers Morgan.
I saw that.
that was. Yeah. I saw that live, and I was really struck. I go, whoa!
I would never watch him. So
I switched channels, and that's it.